Frank and Ben grew up in Perkins, Quebec. They are both 17 years old. For the past 3 weeks, they have been visiting Ben's uncle and aunt in Winnipeg. Ben's uncle is called Uncle Bob and likes to hunt and fish. Ben's aunt is called Aunt Petunia and likes to read the Bible. Staying with both of them, first they were at Uncle Bob's and then they were at Aunt Petunia's, proved to be very difficult. Staying with Uncle Bob was difficult because he was always trying to get Frank and Ben to do work on his ranch. Staying with Aunt Petunia was equally difficult because she treated them like two little children. She even tried to impose a 9 o'clock curfew on them. Frank and Ben didn't abide this curfew. No, after trying to have a good time in Winnipeg, unfortunately they weren't too successful, they didn't come home until 10 o'clock. For Aunt Petunia, 10 o'clock is a disrespectful and ungodly hour. So when they finally showed up at her door, they found it to be locked with all the lights off. When Aunt Petunia finally answered their knock and opened the door, she appeared to them almost like a ghost. She was wearing a nightie and had her hair in curlers and cream all over her face. She scolded them for not coming home at the right time. Frank then answered her rather disrespectfully, and without further ado, she called up Uncle Bob, who doesn't get along with her because she's always after him about his drinking and gambling and chasing after loose women, and told him to come pick up the boys and take them back to the ranch. Frank and Ben then waited on Aunt Petunia's doorstep for 3 hours before Uncle Bob showed up. Dressed as he always is in his cowboy hat, Levi jeans, snakeskin boots, and embroidered shirt with the polka dot handkerchief sticking out of the breast pocket, he made fun of the boys while driving back to the ranch. He thought it was very funny that they had tried to have a good time while staying with his straight-laced and humorless sister. He cracked a lot of jokes and laughed a lot. Frank lost his temper at one point. He even wanted Uncle Bob to stop the truck so he could get out and walk. Meanwhile, Ben couldn't help wondering if there was any truth in Aunt Petunia's remark that his uncle had sold his soul to the devil. On the bus going back to Quebec, Ben says to Frank, "I've got blisters all over my hands from putting in fence posts. It's a good thing we're going home now. I was starting not to like Uncle Bob so much. I was even starting to develop a poor opinion of him. After all, he exploited us by making us do a lot of work around the ranch. He doesn't like to do work himself because then he would have to get his clothes dirty. He always wants to go around looking like a Hollywood cowboy." All of a sudden, 2 young women appear from the back of the bus and plop down in the empty seats that are right across the aisle from Frank and Ben. Besides noticing that one of them is extremely good looking, Frank and Ben notice that they both look like they're not having a good time. The extremely attractive woman says to her friend, I told you it would turn out like this. I told you we couldn't possibly have a good time on a bus." No sooner has she uttered these words than a young man, rather ill-dressed, comes up from the back of the bus and stands in the aisle right next to them. He is swaying, and it is obvious that he has been drinking. "What's the matter with you two?" he says to them in a slurring voice. "What did you leave like that for? Don't you appreciate good company? Don't you see that my friends and I know how to have a good time on the bus?" Instead of answering him, the extremely attractive young woman, who is sitting next to the window, puts on her headset and starts listening to music. The other one, who is sitting near the aisle, opens up a book.